don't know better than a recovery which they can't even prove is avoidable by proving to us how it's even possible to maintain a vital circulation without perpetually suffering the very escalation of artificial indebtedness which we have and will continue to suffer. So what are the states purportedly doing? Here a Cryptogen.com article is titled Virginia, House Joint Resolution 557, quote, establishing a joint subcommittee to study whether the Commonwealth should adopt a currency to serve as an alternative to the currency distributed by the Federal Reserve System in the event of a major breakdown of the Federal Reserve System, unquote. As my work proved over 40 years ago, the preposterous thing about this proposition is that if you introduce some further circulation, not only is it, if it differs at all, incompatible, and at least in some respect, with the existing circulation, it can't even represent the same thing. Nonetheless, this process, which multiplies artificial indebtedness, it still consumes ever more of the circulation in servicing the escalating sum of artificial indebtedness, and so it just siphons up whatever further circulation, alternative currency you might introduce to circulation. And my models that I provided the Reagan administration can be used to illustrate this. You add some circulation of a purportedly different kind, and all you've done is increase the circulation. The whole circulation is still dedicated to servicing this ever-escalating sum of artificial indebtedness because so much, however much, of the circulation is comprised of this obfuscation of the currency, which just vacuums up everything and distributes it to the banking system and implicitly obligates us to maintain a vital circulation by reborrowing it back as further debt. So you don't really even negate the fact that debt is multiplying in proportion to the circulation at all. So no matter what further circulation you introduce to the circulation, it is vacuumed up by this obfuscation of the currency, which distributes all wealth to the central banking system, which produces nothing. So no matter whether this is a paper currency or a metal currency or ostensible, purported precious metal, standard, gold, silver, platinum, whatever, nonetheless, the gold, silver, platinum, fiat, whatever, is vacuumed up by the obfuscation of the currency. So the truth of the matter is this is wasted effort. It's a distraction from the real heart of the matter, which is that unless we rectify the nature of the currency by this immediate transition to mathematically perfected economy, which doesn't even cost us anything, we don't solve our problems. So despite the fact that these people have been written about mathematically perfected economy and never responded, we have the persistence of one bill after another like this. And the states don't even have a constitutional authority to issue currency. So it's not even constitutional for them to propose to do this, to do this even if they propose to do it, rather. And so this, of course, bears on their credibility of the people who author such things. They haven't, first of all, they don't respond to a real solution which has been presented to them. On the other hand, they continue to persist in these preposterous things which can't save us without even demonstrating the least plausible prospect that they could serve us in any way, in any meaningful way whatsoever. If you forestall failure by a few months, by in effect pouring further money into circulation, as the Federal Reserve itself is pouring money into circulation by buying bonds which we're not even servicing. What have you done but what they're doing? You see, you're avoiding the nature of the problem here. You're allowing it to persist because you won't give your attention to the things that really count. Then again, who are the people that are doing this? In many cases, they're Ron Paul supporters or end the Fed people or money can't be a debt people or money can't be credit people. They're people who many years after my work proved that these problems would prevail upon us and that there was one and one only solution, have stood up in the 11th hour and said, no, this is a solution. They've read my work. They've borrowed ideas which aren't even original to them, from my Parable of Perfect Economy, for instance, which demonstrated how money could be spent into circulation as a purpose fault to teach the faults of such a proposition, and these people go on with these things. So, for instance, in the Daily Paul forums, we have an article titled Freedom from Usury, which mentions my work. And so the first post in response to it is read Edwin Vieira books on this subject. Well, who is Edwin Vieira but a plagiarist of my work? Not only did he borrow from my work, but he's put up countless sites all over the internet with the same titles of my papers. Interest is usury. He does this even despite the fact that he's an Austrian economist, which Austrian economists promote not only interest, but higher rates of interest, and the idea that competing banks might possibly save us from all this. And so, what's been done is my work has been gutted so that these people could advocate gold, and gold bugs could benefit from buying gold and an artificial escalation of gold prices above reasonable limits. And all this is nonsense, which is further distraction from solution. Freedom from usury. How can you have freedom from usury if you advocate banking and competing banks and interest, and not only interest, but higher rates of interest, which Ron Paul himself has continually advocated would somehow have prevented us from borrowing excessively, which results in this condition of excessive debt, so he says. That's all the explanation that he provides. But as my YouTube video even animates clearly, and my work is proven for so long, no, on the contrary, Mr. Paul, higher rates of interest necessitate greater reborrowing of periodic interest, which escalates the rate of accumulation of artificial debt and thus the rate of failure. Because when you raise the interest rates from 5% to 15%, for instance, you're paying 10% more interest periodically out of circulation. And it's the periodic interest which you have to reborrow as new debt above the former sum of debt, which increases the sum of artificial indebtedness. Mr. Paul doesn't even go back to the obfuscation of the currency, doesn't even recognize that it exists. Bankers are just somehow, for merely publishing evidence of our promissory obligations to each other, merely accepts the idea that that's justified, and that the principal is owed to them, though they gave up no lawful consideration whatsoever. So he's actually advocating that banks launder the principal into their possession, and advocating further that they multiply that lie of a debt to the bank into further debt, not only by present rates of interest, but even by higher rates of interest, which he only says would somehow prevent us from borrowing further, but which borrowing further would be impossible to avoid if we even maintain a vital circulation while we service these debts that he's advocating be subject to greater rates of interest. And here on the Daily Paul forums, the title of the article is Freedom from Usury, as if Mr. Paul himself stands for such a thing. It's impossible that he stands for such a thing. And, of course, he's avoided, for 30 years, he's avoided discussing this with me, even answering back to, the dozens of letters that I've written him, and the so-called Libertarian Party and so forth. And, he's entirely unaccountable. You can't even find anything in Austrian economics theory, and it's like conventional economics, it's entirely bereft of formal proof and theorem. There isn't a single proof of anything that Austrian economics asserts. So, there's no validation of Mr. Paul's mere slogans that he spews out as if he's going to help us by competing banks and higher rates of interest, which he merely implies would somehow have saved us from a sum of terminal indebtedness, which higher rates of interest, in fact, can only escalate. And so, particularly in the end of the lifespan of this terminal system, you have all this turmoil, which is, in general terms, can be understood to be efforts to withstand a system which imposes terminal failure. Money has to move. Proprietorship changes. We have all this incomprehensible activity. That is, it's incomprehensible if you don't understand that this system is terminal, that there's no escaping its consequences without rectifying it, and yet those who are most responsible for the crimes of the present day resist more so resist this necessary rectification than anyone, and they become the most prominent players because as things fail, larger volumes of money can swallow up smaller entities, hoping in this persistent ignorance of the fact that the system is terminal to peddle them here or there for whatever further unearned gain, which is, in truth, the most effective way of withstanding the terminal crime of the system, because production is expensive. So what you have here is, article after article. Wall Street, often slow to disclose brokers' sins. Of course, Many banks are clinging to billions in bailout money. Of course. Can they loan them to people who can't pay it back, subject to the fact that, they owe to the central bank? Of course not. Goldman will repay Buffett his $5 billion. His $5 billion. It doesn't say for what. Of course it doesn't. With Fed consent, banks raise dividends and buy back stock. Of course they can. Ex-Goldman director sues SEC over galleon case. We don't even know what the case is, but who is this man who's likely corrupt? They didn't even give his name, but he's corrupt because he's part of a corrupt thing that's taking from us without producing anything. That is corruption. And so he's suing the Securities Exchange Commission, which is probably hampered, in fear of these people who have monetary clout, and of all things, Silicon Valley backs effort to help foreign entrepreneurs. Is this what we really need to save us? Why don't these people support mathematically perfected economy? Is there anything else which is going to save us? I mean, these things are just preposterous. This is what we call news. And all it's about, it really is what's irrelevant to the exclusion of the only thing which is relevant, and that is a fact of actual solution, which can be demonstrated to be the one and only solution